Just the mention of his name once sent a chill down the spine. In a place already defined by horror, he stood as its darkest symbol. They called him the Angel of Death, Josef Mengele. A man trained to heal, yet obsessed with cruelty. His white gloves, calm voice, and gentle demeanor masked a heart capable of unimaginable evil. Beneath the title of Doctor, he committed acts so twisted they seemed beyond human comprehension. His victims were not soldiers or enemies, and they were children. Innocent lives became his laboratory. This is the story of the monster of Auschwitz. Josef Mengele was born on March 16, 1911, in the Bavarian town of Günzburg, Germany. After 3 miscarriages, he became the cherished firstborn of Karl and Walburga Mengele. His father owned a prosperous machinery factory that later produced munitions during World War I. Walburga, stern and dominant, adored Josef with an intensity that shaped his early years. Though she was feared by many, Josef lived to please her. As a child, he was quiet, disciplined, and eager for approval. Yet beneath this obedience was a boy desperate to meet impossible expectations, a pattern that would later twist into something sinister. In school, Josef was an average student, often struggling to meet his mother's strict standards. At 15, he contracted osteomyelitis, a severe bone marrow disease that left him bedridden for 6 months. Many did not survive such an illness, but Josef recovered, returning to school far behind his classmates. Through sheer will and discipline, he not only caught up but surpassed many of them. By 17, the shy, frail boy had transformed into a confident and handsome young man. Driven, ambitious, and admired by teachers and peers alike, he began to dream of a career that would command both respect and power. In April 1930, 19-year-old Mengele passed his exams and was accepted into Munich University to study medicine and philosophy. He was a striking figure, impeccably dressed, polite, and cultured. Women found him charming. Men respected his intellect. During his first year, he became interested in politics and joined the Stahlhelm, a nationalist paramilitary group advocating a return to the German monarchy. The Stahlhelm introduced him to Nazi ideology, ideas of racial purity, national pride, and social Darwinism. The concept of eugenics fascinated him. The belief that humanity could be perfected through selective breeding would soon consume his mind. By 1935, Mengele had earned a Ph.D. in anthropology with a thesis titled Racial Morphological Research on the lower jaw section of 4 racial groups. Though written in academic terms, his work hinted at his growing obsession with racial hierarchy. A year later, he earned his medical degree and began working under Dr. Ottmar von Verschuer, Germany's leading expert on heredity and racial biology at the University of Frankfurt. His duties included examining individuals accused of violating Nazi racial laws, determining who was Jewish. His meticulous records and cold detachment would later fuel the machinery of genocide. In May 1937, Mengele officially joined the Nazi Party, followed a year later by his induction into the SS, Hitler's elite guard. The SS prided itself on being the purest Aryan brotherhood, and Mengele fit the image perfectly. Tall, disciplined, and ambitious, he impressed his superiors. Around this time, he became engaged to Irene Schönbein, the daughter of a Frankfurt professor. She was beautiful, blonde, and refined, the ideal Nazi bride. But Irene's ancestry raised doubts. Her lineage could not be traced to pure Aryan roots. Only the influence of the wealthy Mengele family allowed the marriage to proceed. The couple married in July 1939, shortly before the outbreak of war. However, their incomplete racial documentation barred them from SS honors. Shortly after, Josef was called to serve a brief military stint in the Tyrolean mountains. Athletic and fit, he performed admirably, earning praise from his commanders. When war erupted, he returned to Frankfurt, but Germany soon demanded every able man. Initially rejected due to a childhood kidney infection, he was eventually drafted. It was the beginning of a transformation, from academic scientist to soldier. A man of intellect was about to find a new identity on the battlefield. In 1940, Mengele was assigned to the Waffen-SS as a second lieutenant. Initially, he worked in a non-combat role in the Race and Resettlement Office. But when Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, he volunteered for frontline duty. On the Eastern Front, he proved himself brave, earning the Iron Cross Second Class. Later, while serving as a field doctor with the Viking Division, he received the Iron Cross First Class after rescuing men from a burning tank. His bravery and loyalty impressed his superiors and set the stage for his transfer to a position that would define his infamy. In 1943, Mengele was given his dream assignment, an opportunity to conduct practical eugenics research on living subjects. The perfect laboratory awaited him, Auschwitz-Birkenau. It was remote, heavily guarded, and brimming with prisoners from across Europe. Here the angel of death would merge science and sadism. He arrived in May 1943 and immediately took part in his first selection, deciding which arrivals would live and which would die. That day, over 1,000 gypsies were sent to the gas chambers by the flick of his wrist. Dressed immaculately in white gloves and boots, he looked more like a conductor than a killer. Auschwitz became Mengele's kingdom. He oversaw 74 transport selections, sending 80% of new arrivals directly to their deaths. All children under 14 were gassed immediately unless they caught his attention. Twins fascinated him most. He believed that through them, he could unlock the secrets of heredity and manipulate human genetics. Guards scoured new arrivals for twins, dwarfs, and people with unusual features. Those chosen were separated from their families and brought to filthy barracks. Yet before each experiment, Mengele ensured they were washed, clothed, and catalogued, as if they were valuable specimens rather than terrified human beings. He created extensive records on each child, documenting their physical features and family backgrounds. Often, he would appear in his pristine uniform, smiling gently as he handed out candy to gain their trust. To the children, he seemed kind, until they were strapped to his operating tables. His laboratories, scattered around Auschwitz, were chambers of horror. The experiments performed there defied comprehension. Injections into eyes to change color, organ removals without anesthesia, forced freezing, sterilization, and electric endurance tests. Every twin who died meant their sibling was immediately killed for autopsy comparison. Pain and fear were data points in his pursuit. Despite claiming scientific legitimacy, his experiments had no medical purpose. Survivors later recalled that his cruelty often seemed fueled by pleasure rather than research. When not experimenting, Mengele conducted selections and even delivered babies, only to send both mother and child to the gas chambers. Sometimes he taped mothers' breasts so infants starved before their eyes. His power within Auschwitz was absolute, and he used it without mercy. Alongside him often walked Irma Gries, a young SS guard as ruthless as he was. Together, they embodied the perverse ideal of the Aryan race, beautiful, disciplined, and monstrous. Mengele's sadism grew worse over time. On Jewish holy days, he ordered mass gassings to celebrate. When confronted with his own forbidden desires, he turned them into violence. One survivor recalled a young Jewish girl whose beauty aroused him. Unable to bear the contradiction, he mutilated her beyond recognition, then left her to die. He occasionally adopted young boys who resembled him, treating them kindly for weeks before leading them, hand in hand, to the gas chamber. The more he killed, the more respect he gained from his Nazi superiors. His cruelty became a badge of honor within the twisted hierarchy of Auschwitz. By early 1945, with the war collapsing, Mengele knew his time at Auschwitz was ending. As the Soviets advanced, he burned his records and prepared his escape. On January 17th, he vanished from the camp. 10 days before liberation, the Russians arrived to find a wasteland of corpses and ash. Mengele fled through Germany, disguising himself as a regular soldier. Captured briefly by Soviet forces, he managed to hide his SS identity and was later released by the Americans. The Angel of Death had escaped justice, disappearing into the ruins of post-war Europe as millions mourned the lives he destroyed. For 3 years, he lived as a laborer in Bavaria under false names, constantly fearing capture. But as Nazi hunters began exposing war criminals, Mengele fled Europe. In 1949, using a fake Red Cross identity, he obtained a Swiss passport and sailed to Buenos Aires, Argentina. There, under the protection of President Juan Perón, a known Nazi sympathizer, he found safety. Working as a carpenter, he rebuilt a comfortable life, supported by his wealthy father in Germany. Among fellow exiled Nazis, Mengele was respected, even admired for his intelligence and composure. The world had not yet forgotten him, but he felt untouchable. His first wife, Irene, divorced him in absentia. In 1956, during a family trip to Switzerland, Mengele charmed his late brother's widow, Martha. They married a year later, and she, along with her son Rolf, joined him in Argentina. Wealth returned and life grew luxurious. He lived in an upscale neighborhood surrounded ironically by Jewish families. Confident, he dropped his alias and resumed using his real name. But Nazi hunters were closing in. Holocaust survivor Hermann Langbein obtained Irene's divorce papers, confirming Mengele's presence in Buenos Aires. In 1959, West Germany issued a warrant for his arrest. The chase had begun. Warned just in time, Mengele fled to Paraguay, then to Brazil. There, he lived with sympathetic families, moving frequently to avoid detection. The years eroded his arrogance, but not his delusions. In his mind, he remained a man of science, unrepentant and misunderstood. By the 1960s, international attention on Nazi fugitives reignited, and trials in Germany revealed the full scope of his atrocities. Survivors described his inhuman experiments in vivid, painful detail. Yet even as the world condemned him, Mengele evaded capture, protected by loyalists and his family's money. The monster who once commanded Auschwitz lived out his days in hiding. By the 1970s, Josef Mengele was an old, bitter man. Paranoid, lonely, and plagued by health problems, he lived quietly in Brazil under an assumed name. A stroke in 1976 left him partially paralyzed. In February 1979, while swimming off a beach in Bertioga, he suffered another stroke and drowned. The angel of death was dead. When his identity was confirmed years later, it brought little comfort to his victims' families. He had escaped justice, dying without a trace of remorse. The man who once decided who lived and who died had finally met his own end, alone and forgotten.